gosh, as Beckett says somewhere, inspiring prospects. It's marvelous to see you all. Thank you for being here this afternoon. Kaiwan, shall we begin?
We shall.
So what we thought we'd do this afternoon is to bring to you from two different but overlapping perspectives our experience of what it means to live in a city, what it means to see it as a stage for strife and conflict and violence and solidarity, but also to see it as a place of fantasy, of the extension of the imagination, the creation of new identities, and really to see how, over against all the forces of flattening that are now in place, how we might still retrieve the histories of the city in different ways. And as we sit here, it strikes, we had this conversation just before that, both for Kaiwan and for me, this place has very special importance, Little Theatre. We each spent substantial parts of our youth here and were in a green room that once used to be the Mohile Parekh Center for the Visual Arts, the NCPA, where both of us had various contributions to make. Okay, so here's what we'll do. I'll start out with a set of readings from these books, Hunchprose and Jonahwhale, and Kaiwan will then read from his marvelous book, Alice in Bhuleshwar, and then we'll either have a Q&A with ourselves, but the impressive nature of this audience leads me to think that we should actually have a proper Q&A. Again, thank you all for being here. I thought I'd take a bit of a risk and start with a prose poem called Siddhi Mubarak Bombay, which is really somewhat audaciously in the voice of an enslaved person who was brought here as a boy from East Africa early in the 19th century. We've liked to see ourselves as a cotton city. We've finally recognized that we were an opium city, but we haven't yet coped with the fact that we also played a role in the horrendous global slave trade. But this is a story of someone who came here vulnerable and disenfranchised and then made something of himself. Siddhi Mubarak, Bombay, 1820 to 1885. I should go home now, but I forget where that is. A child, I was sold for a length of cotton and hammered into a link in a chain of caravans. Taken across the sea in a dhow, the Arab slavers had been generous with the whip. The Gujarati merchant who bought me had a sense of humor. He called me Mubarak, blessed. Many years I worked for him in Bombay. City of opium warehouses, city of cotton godowns, city of spice stores, city of jahazis, munshis, khalasis, sarafs, bhishtis, sepoys. That was the only family I knew. So I called myself Bombay. My Seth died, leaving instructions that I was to be freed. I went back to Zanzibar and built a house. In Bombay, I was a Siddhi, a man from the Zanjaman, the color of night. In Zanzibar, I spoke Gujarati, Hindustani, 2 words of English, stuttered in Kiswahili. But this new old country spoke to me in rhymes of soil, sand, river, jungle. It brought me gold, coral, also pearls. Speak, Sahib, Bwana speak, wanted me to be his guide. Then Burton Sahib came, Bwana Burton, then Bwana Stanley. Bwana speak was looking for the source of the Nile. So were they all. I was their compass and their sextant. With them I looked for the source of the Nile. Once we nearly died, as if the journey was cursed. Burton Sahib vomiting all the time, Bwana speak going blind, his eyes gummy and swollen with too much dreaming. At last, Ujiji, the lake rippled from one end of the world to the other, wide as a sea cradled in a giant's palm, God forgive us, we tried to cross it. Bwana Speak lost his hearing. A beetle had crawled into his ear. What afrith possessed him, I don't know, but he tried to get it out with a knife. No boats large enough to cross that lake. Later, I crossed Africa from coast to coast, walked more than any other man alive, logged 6,000 miles, most of it on foot. Match that if you can. Sometimes donkeys. Long after I left Bombay and went back to Zanzibar, its smells followed me. Freshly chopped garlic, fenugreek, hing, pepper, cinnamon, bombil drying in a sharp wind. Bombil, I would say to myself, sitting on my stoop, looking across the sea, rolling the syllables in my mouth. Bombil, surmai, bangra, ravas. The masala, thick pungency of one fish after another, would settle on my tongue. My neighbors must have thought I was chanting spells.
Thanks, Ranjit. The towers of Notre Dame, with its hunched domes and griffin, the hill of Sacré-Cœur, Rottenburg with its capella, Birkenkopf with its amphitheater, they all look and they all look down. They are all in search of a vision, a geometry. Stand at the gateway of India in Mumbai, and you can discern a vision of continuous imaginations, a vision where sight should have traveled as far as it can see. Could I have leaped from tower to tower, terrace to terrace, hill to hill, like a kite, or like a child chasing a kite, to know what it is to be free of the city, its clutches of streets and traffic, its labyrinth of space and hidden garbage? Or should I have been lost in the labyrinth of doors and windows I never notice as I walk down a street? The impressive urge to view cities floating above its mass and masses is the urge to freedom, is the urge to comprehension, is the urge for the fraction of a moment to believe that I know the city. A walk is every tourist, every visitor's urge to know the city, a grasp on that object we believe is the city, like the claws of a descending eagle. But it is here that the storyteller of the walk begins his or her very personal journey, a journey he or she repeats and repeats to know herself more than she knew the last time. The visitor goes home with a few objects, a few collectibles that he or she now imagines to be the city of Mumbai or Bombay, the name they are still confused over. These objects will keep the visitor awake in his dream sequence of knowing the city. Places have memory. When we carry back the memory of that place, what do we take back? Or what do we lose and what do we keep? The memory of that place, or just ourselves, lost often, but found and conserved once in a while. The only logic is the story, the narrative. Whatever the story, whatever the narrative, its existence is the existence of a place, of a city, and its cityness. The walk is as much about the storyteller as it is about the city. It is about the storyteller inside the city. It is about the storyteller and his objects inside the city. It is about his logic inside the city.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
So in the spirit of memories and walks and how one traces one's way through the city, I'm going to read this one. This is the first poem in Jonahwhale. It's called The Churchgate Gazette. And it is in 6, mercifully not very long, sections. 1. Last word on the subject, I promise. I walked into the train station and it was terrifying. Like nerve gas had laid the architecture out flat, the tall glass columns bloodshot and the booking clerks slumped over, all dead at the till. A plaster Gandhi with sulfur-rimmed eyes stopped me. What a substitute for coal, and why? You missed the last train, it said, he said. You missed the last and only train that was safe for a man who's left half his life behind. 2. A straggler from a late-night movie had more advice. You could so easily gag on a wine-red, tasseled silk scarf stuffed in your mouth, he said. You could so easily gag on sour saliva or a shard of bay leaf or a letter swallowed just after the bell has rung and before the door opens. 3. I thought of the possibilities as I left the station without a compass. Walk straight enough, said Gandhi, and you could walk into the sea. At the wharf, the sailors' wives were keening together. They were singing the last songs of the whales. I was their brother, and I had killed them with my broken harpoon and my rusted smile. 4. Find affection, I told myself. That's fundamental. Find a voice that doesn't draw blood each time you hear it. I walked past myself. I rippled across lean men and sleek women laughing behind plate glass, their hands caught in pools of light, wine gleaming in brittle flutes. 5. Birdsong disturbs the king of incomplete lives. He wakes up in the middle of the novel he's writing in the Midnight Hotel. His eyes need shielding from the raw clarity of neon. He is back where he began, with a plate of waxy grapes and a blunt silver knife on his bedside table. 6. Break ice for me. Let me fall through stinging water in my skin of rust and flame. I've jumped from a tree that's branched into the clouds. It's sucked up all the reality I've watered it with. Its fruits are red and wrinkled. I plunge into drowned gardens where I walked once, sinking, the water stroking my crown of leaves as it comes apart. Dark tribune, archaic clown, I open my eyes. Continuing the geography, this one's called Marine Drive. There's a color whose name I've lost to the ash fleece of cloud, the grackled light of a monsoon sky seesawing in the gaze, unframed, a trap for the sailboat wheeling in the bay. This color that hovers between tenses, some call it violet, others squeeze their eyes shut when it surges through slate-gray folds of water, either not yet or too late, never tame at your heel. But look, the rocks are coming into view. Dazed seals resurrected from the waves, the tides worked itself loose off the shore and drifted out. There are no explanatory notes. What's left behind is not the remainder. There's a color whose name I cannot speak. And I'll do one more which refers to a place, and a place which you really can't see anymore, I've realized. Obscured by the coastal road. Haji Ali. It's called Haji Ali, the poem. You wouldn't remember me. I came and went like rain out of season. At Haji Ali, the stoplights changed without recording my passage. I stumbled along the beach, the sea snapping at my heels, guardian angel of the weather with one wing broken. I couldn't stop summer when it prowled and roared in streets that should have been flooded. Every screen in every movie hall was set to 0 or lower. I couldn't push back the tide when it washed over the narrow road pointing to the Saints' Island. All I could do when I left was to gather up and carry every one of your boats away. They are riding at anchor in this song you've been trying to remember.
Ranjit, maybe I'm that remnant from Churchgate and Marine Lines. And the remnant will move to Churney Road.
Brilliant.
So I must thread the tormenting complications of this labyrinth physically as well as mentally wherever I go out, and I am both exasperated and touched when, as sometimes happens, I lose myself for a moment in my own maze. Those are not my words, that's Kafka in The Burrow. It's the chapter Your City, My City. How do we see the city? The very streets we walk and the buildings we see in our city are patterns of change and history. The native town of colonial Bombay is a walk between two stations today, Churney Road and Marine Lines of the Western Railway, once known as the BBNCI, Bombay, Baroda and Central India Railways. The road via Albles Bagh, down St. Teresa's Church, Khotachiwadi, Vittalbhai Patel Road, formerly Sanders Road, Kawasji Patel Tank, and Bhuleshwar to Kalba Devi, and then Princess Street. Is an interesting peek into the structure of the island and the way agriculture, trade, and pilgrimage have through history defined these areas. At the same time, the new flyover, this is the early days of Mambadali Road flyover. At the same time, the new flyover, like the new coastal road, that cuts the city east by west and runs over Mambadali Road, leads to other areas like Imamwada, Samuel Street, grain stores, a Mapla mosque, trading pedis in the Narsinatha Street, and synagogues like the Gate of Mercy. Waves of migration involves traders, weavers, carpenters, and wage laborers, and attempts to organize themselves into communities or groups based on caste and religion have established a unique kind of geography in the neighborhood. Contrary to how it was often imagined, there are no ghettoized demarcations. There are instead ambiguous streets that are dominated by different professions and groups. These streets often do not look very different from one another, but do have distinctive characteristics identifiable by sight and encounter. The crowd of people and cycles, cars and handcarts does not allow one to look around for long. The negotiations that one employs to navigate these streets dominates one's experience of the area. The navigation itself is an experience that once mastered lends to the walker the enjoyment of being a mover on a dice game board. The occasional look above eye level may reveal little, even as electric wires and water pipelines occupy the vision and distress the eye. Yet these streets often lead to courtyards and chowks, beyond gates and often within walls, which are havens of silence. Outside such courtyards, however, the architecture and its details may be easily missed in the melee. The neighborhood, often a kind of visual chaos, incomprehensible to the unexercised eye. This chaos is exotica for the tourist's eye, and it is both sham and shame to the local gaze. It is not the exotica, nor is it the sham that brings us here. It is the bolus of hidden visuals, the misplaced stories, the dusty and crumbling history that the city needs to see and understand in these neighborhoods. Indeed, the functioning life and the remnants of history in the neighborhood are like slots in a board game. The board game here is a multi-dimensional, many hands roll the dice. How would we design a map for such a neighborhood? There are maps that we hold in our hands and walk while visiting places as tourists. These maps show us the streets and the roads as seen from the skies. But what maps do we work with every day? Are our daily maps sheets of colored paper in our hands? Does our map have textures and smells? Does our map tell us what was rough and hard and where the noise levels plummet? Do we navigate streets in a way similar to a blind person reading and seeing the most animated stories through a bunch of pages punched with holes? Can we all have our own distinct maps for the street we call Narsinatha or VP Road? Maps and streets are often like games, a bunch of rules to navigate a path where every player is cautiously aware of every other player for various different reasons. Every time you play a game, it is a new game. The game board is the same. Its dice and pawns may not change. Often players and teams may be the same too. But every game is a new game. Every walk in a neighborhood is a new walk. Can my map change every day? Every map I draw, dream, and keep, adjust, and amend is a story of the neighborhood. It is a story of my walk in Vasanti Bain's neighborhood, in Kavasji Patel's neighborhood, in the rag picker's neighborhood. To come to the trains, because you reach Churni Road with the train. As the train breezes through from Churni Road station to Marine Lines station, we never take cognizance of the scraps of history to our left, living and dying every day as we move past them. Many have romanticized the trains in Bombay and Mumbai, and rightly so, but sometimes I cannot help feeling that these boxes of steel are pure nothingness, like coffins of steel, transferring the city from here to there. They mix up the city like the milkman churning milk in Bhuleshwar. Neighborhoods in the city come to their railway stations, get scattered to be collected again in the evening, transforming the neighborhoods they once left that morning. As we step out of these rolling steel crates, we step into new neighborhoods, making them new again. We move through many lanes and streets every day, sometimes negotiating the traffic, at other times garbage, and often even the marriage procession of a man we do not know but surely recognize. Indeed, Bhuleshwar has numerous marriage halls, a large quantity of garbage, and a temple round every corner, which one might not be aware of.
It just struck me while you were reading, Kaiwan, that the great transformation of the many that we've seen in the course of our own lives is of how Bombay has gone from being a very interstitial city of different kinds of cultural and social and economic capital bound together in the same neighborhoods to something that's much more exclusionary, much more enclave-based. I mean, New Delhi went for an American zoning model. We never had zoning here, but it's now, there's a kind of informal zoning that seems to be happening.
And I think that's the point of the negotiation, that we lose out on our abilities to negotiate every day and differences.
Absolutely.
If we sort of lose the interstitiality.
Yeah. Also, I was just thinking back to how growing up, teenage years even, the big theme in the city was labor, the textile mills, the strike, the lockout, and all of that. And after 1992, that turned into a very different debate and a different sense of anxiety about identity, religion, ethnicity, how you were perceived. So maybe in a set of poems that I'll now read, I'll try and bear witness to some of that kind of, not the shift in itself, but what it does to people, to their minds. Town. In this town, ask for directions in whispers. Tell no one your birth name. Say you're on your way to nightfall. Buy more bread than you'll eat. Read the signboards forwards and back. Mimic the rare songbird hiding in a bush. stride along the pipeline bridging the creek, shuffle off the linen strap on the Kevlar, play infidel on the hill, believer on the beach, because one blue is so much closer to us than the other, on your knees, in the sand, and when it's time, pray you'll come back as pearl thread surf, not driftwood in this town. Prayer. Don't ask for the wall of the skin to break, the light blue line of morning to be drawn across your eyelids, the first watchful parrot of the day to ambush you with prayers. Peel back every proverb you were taught to reveal the raw welt of ardor until you find where the reluctant chronicler wrote, burn and dance, because what is healed is dead. And a poem in a slightly different note about the kinds of characters who used to inhabit our streets, people of no fixed abode or occupation, but who had a place, but who have no place now in a highly functional scenario. Saturday. The man who is Saturday arrives smeared in vermilion, his one good eye bloodshot, his other eye in geostationary orbit. He plays two roles, the man who is Saturday. He's the comet rushing down the street, skirting the edge of luck. He's the dancer on the island, misdirecting the traffic with a genial wave and a pointing finger. He ends the week with the kind of thunderclap you'd think was the monopoly of the rider on the grey horse, waving his sword of fire, wagging his fan of peacock feathers, exploding nucleus of this honkahedron day, the man who is Saturday. Tower. A water tower that's crested floods, been baked by droughts, stands overrun by waves of crows. A girl in a navy polka dot blouse streams past on a Vespa, calling out, "Way to go." Two candidates for the big election scowl at each other from shiny billboards. They're losing 40 million flakes of skin a day each that spiral into the greasy air above the bricklayer's cart, the surveyor's tripod, printing on the sky's blank scrim a second tower. No one saw it coming. A sucker punch from a big, invisible fist. And I'll close with this section with this. This is called Market. Never forget the salt makers. They can trap the sea. Never forget the makers of flint knives. They can split the earth. Never forget the spice sellers. They can tempt the tongue to sing. Never forget the kite makers. They can scissor the wind into streamers. Never forget the carpenters. They can build horses that breach walled cities. Never forget those who stretch hide into leather. They can craft drums that bring down palaces.
Streets are reminders of days when clocks shifted from buildings and towers to risks, and they occupied the order of a new metropolitan life. The farce of Dhanji Garak, which used to be performed between plays in the Parsi Gujarati theatre, was such a story of craftsmanship and profession in the new metropolis. The farce was based on the life of one Dhanji, with suffix Garak, literally meaning craftsman or maker, referring to his profession of being a watch repairer. The farce depicted how Dhanji, on the pretext of repairing watches, stole the parts that were working in perfect condition. Dhanji's shop on Kalba Devi Road was soon identified with the one in the farce, and he soon lost his clients. Clerks, sweepers, watchmakers, and some indefinite and disreputable professions, as defined in the colonial records, occupied the order. One more occupation that organized the neighborhood and continues to do so even today is the Pakhaliwala. As one walks in the streets of Bhuleshwar, Memanwada, or Kavil, one is sure to notice men in flaring shorts or dhotis pacing the footpath and negotiating the traffic with leather bags hanging from their shoulders. These leather pouches, which look like the belly of a horse or a camel, is a water carrier called a pakhali or masak. Besides pakhaliwalas, one will also see men pushing along a water vat cart, the old ones made of wood, while the new ones of steel. The pakhaliwalas at one point in time sprayed water on town roads in the morning and evening to keep the dust from flying, at a time when roads were not tarred and macadamized. The system depends on local water supply sites. The city, and especially the Seven Islands area, is surprisingly a very good source of fresh groundwater. The presence of the sea on all sides dominating the slivers of land masses that once formed the islands makes one wonder at the large number of tanks and wells that once dotted the island city. Most of them continue even today to supply fresh water, like the one in Krishna Bagh or the Bikhaberam well in the fort area. Dhobi Talav and Paidoni were sites of large tanks where people collected to wash and clean. The word Dhobi means a clothes washer, while Paidoni indicates the site where Victoria drivers stopped to wash themselves, their horses and their coaches. Today on the site of the Dhobi Talav tank stands the Greek-style building of the Petit Library. CP Tank, as the name indicates, was another such site later reclaimed by land. Many tanks were filled up during epidemics like malaria and plague, since the administration imagined that these tanks as the breeding grounds for filth and disease. However, wells in private temple complexes and some fountains continue to exist. From private wells and fountains, water is collected in vats and distributed to the consumers by the pakhaliwalas. Hawkers, shop owners, migrant labor, all are the end users of this system. Being a colony, designs for sanitation and water supply got here very late, often in the aftermath of a devastating event like the plague. The crowding of people and buildings in native towns due to waves of migration made conditions often very tense, and the administration rarely wished to invest in planning systems like water supply and sanitation. The narrow leaking alleys are stamps of a colonial past, overburdened by the caste system that expects the social human hierarchy to manage the darker sides of neighborhoods and towns. I'll close with a reading of one person entering such a neighborhood. The whole place is pickled, and people are pickles for sure. Rotterdam or anywhere, by beautiful South. In us all it still lives, the dark corners, the secret alleys, shuttered windows, squalid courtyards, rowdy pubs, and sinister inns. We walk through the broad streets of the newly built town, but our steps and our glances are uncertain. Inside we tremble just as before in the ancient streets of our misery. Our heart knows nothing of the slum clearance which has been achieved. The unhealthy, old town within us is far more real than the new, hygienic town around us. With our eyes open, we walk through a dream, our lives only a ghost of a vanished age. And this is Kafka actually writing in Gustav Jovanovic, Conversations with Kafka. He traveled in a third-class compartment from Ahmedabad to Bombay. This is from his biography. I roughly translated for the book from Gujarati. In the morning, I got off the train at some station. My uncle was there to receive me. Getting the coolie to carry my luggage, we started our walk towards the Gaiety Theatre. It was the morning of 19th May 1901 that I stepped into Gaiety Theatre for the first time. The gaiety that was to be the mark of my personality and career. I entered the gaiety with a natural bout of romance and happiness. On the first sight of the theatre school, my heart skipped a beat. The tenderness in my heart was coupled with the excitement of joy, as if I had encountered a place I always knew. The way my heart would have danced at the sight of a known place, so was it as I entered Gaiety. My legs felt a burst of energy as I stood before the Rangmanch, the gay stage. The physical self emitted the spirit to act, to perform. Images and visions of a Gujarati lady with joyous and serious expressions danced in front of me on the stage. Audience, oh audience, my Gujaratis, my beloved, my family, oh great Rangmanch. The echo of clapping hands and the expressions of a woman's face, it was all there unfolding in front of me. I felt as if my soul's energy was bursting with enthusiasm to portray the Gujaratan, the Gujarati lady. Knowing or unknowingly, the actor in me was flowing with joy and expressing the self forth. This gaiety would one day give me glory. This gaiety would bring me gold laurels. This gaiety will entertain to satisfaction of thousands of Gujaratis. And one day suddenly, I would have to leave this gaiety. Oh, one day, my character on this stage will join in my name for the rest of my life. All this I did not know, that this Gaiety Theatre will be the capital cinema of another day. I did not know that day. It was joy and excitement that day. My mind was bloated with the spirit of the gay stage. It could only partake in the Rangila, the joyous dance of spring and dream that day at the site of the Gaiety. This is from Thoda Asu, Thoda Fool, the autobiography of Jaishankar Sundari. Capital Cinema still stands today at Boribandar or VT or CST, as you wish to call it. It stands opposite the mark of Imperial Bombay, the Victoria Station, a structure that marked a crucial moment in the architectural evolution and professional history of the city. A structure designed by an architect who had never visited Bombay or India, with skilled craftsmen and engineers and architects from India constructing the entire assemblage on site. Traveling portfolios of architectural details and textile patterns freely decorated this building. Observe the tympanum of the peacock in full bloom. In between these two structures of our story stands the statue of Kaiwan Mehta, the first Indian to get a place of prominence in the Bombay Municipal Corporation. His statue stands at the place where probably once stood the Bazaar Gate, the third and northern gate of the Bombay Fort town. The theatres in their location, design and performance define the city. Just as planning and the imagination of native dirt distinguished parts of the city, theatres on the one hand designed class divisions and on the other hand compelled the overlapping of elite, native and colonial lives. Indeed, audiences, spectators and actors all designed the city of dreaming shadows for us. Jaishankar Sundari was a male impersonator who achieved fame in the Parsi theatre of early 20th century Bombay. 100 years apart, we are reading changes. Exactly. At a time when men played the role of women, boys were selected in their youth and trained to impersonate the female voice and poise. Very few, however, survived for long in these roles as their voices and bodies changed with age. Jaishankar was a rage as an actress on the Gujarati Parsi theatre stage, just like his contemporary Bal Gandharva was a rage as an actress on the Marathi theatre stage. The Parsi theatre companies, which were the first of their kind akin to joint stock companies, worked with strict disciplinary regimes and borrowed freely from various cultures, like the Shakespearean stage and the Gujarati Bhavai, to entertain the new urban comprador bourgeoisie in the emerging industrial towns, becoming most famous in a city like Bombay, the quintessential urban setting of the 19th century world. Bhangwadi on Kalbadevi Road was the last theatre where plays were performed. Playhouses began to be closed down during the plague. The plague or the pandemic of corona was no different, although we supposedly believe we've developed over 100 years. Close to the theatre is Dukkar Gali. The vegetarians, hold your guts. Close to the theatre is Dukkar Gali, which, as the name suggests, had a number of pork shops. Even today, there are 2 pork shops on this street, and the old timber architecture compels one to imagine the streetscape as it would have been in the late 19th century. The street has a church at one end and a fire temple at the other. Other attractions are Paris Bakery, Gujarat Farsan selling shops, and the two pork shops in small chapel-like buildings, besides residences and trade agencies that now occupy this area. At the point where the planned Princess Street, parallel to Dukkar Gali, meets Kalbadevi Road, there is an old photo studio. Just as one enters Kalbadevi Road, the clutter of traffic is overwhelming, and one is constantly maneuvering oneself to walk here, finding shade from the hot sun or shelter from the pelting rain, avoiding a leaking pipe here and the air conditioner condensation there. In all this, one is sure to miss a howdah-carrying elephant stretching along the height of the first floor of the adjoining building, spanning the large arched entranceway to the wadi, often called Bhangwadi or Hathi building. The elephant form is close to the representation of elephants in Rajput palaces or similar imagery in Rajasthani and Gujarati art and architecture, painting and sculpture. The elephant has a covered and decorated palanquin on its back, and on the cloth that drapes its ample back, one can read the words, "Wisdom above riches."
Amazing. It's fantastic.
It says, please wrap up.
It says, please
So
wrap up.
we've wrapped
We're very
up.
Brechtian in our dramaturgy. Does that mean wrap up and leave, or does that mean Q&A? We have to ask the authorities who are
It means wrap up and leave, unfortunately, because we have to turn the theatre around for the next session.
Thank you very much, Ranjit.
Thank
for
you.
this.
Thank you, Kaiwan. Thank you, all of you.
Thank
for
you,
your attention.
everyone. Thank you.